One. Welcome everybody to another episode of Smart Money Circle. Today is a very special episode with a very special guest. I have Mr. Sean Feeney, CEO, Chief Executive Officer of USAT Technologies. Ticker symbol there is USAT with us today. The reason why it's a special show, it's Sean's birthday. So start without further ado. Happy birthday, Sean. And thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Well, thanks, Adam. Adam, it's great to be with you. And, I'm just feeling a little bit older today, but plenty of energy. Looking forward to it.
Excellent. So first question, Sean, I always like to ask is, can you tell us your story, how you got to where you are today and the path and all that fun stuff?
Sure. I'd be happy to. And I'm always intrigued. I've listened to several of your podcasts, and it's amazing the number of people that kind of start with the same story where I started in a tiny little town. Nice. So I'm from a tiny little town in upstate New York between Buffalo and Rochester. If you're from New York State, you may have heard of it. We're famous for the Attica State Prison.
Okay.
And so there's more people behind the walls than outside. And, I grew up the oldest of five kids in a home with my dad was the high school principal at the high school I went to. And my mom was a former teacher, but a homemaker. And, from there, I looked around and was trying to decide what to do. And living in a small town, you don't get exposed to a lot of things. But I looked and saw that there were basically four jobs in my hometown: prison guard,
okay,
school teacher or coach,
right,
bartender, dairy farmer. I hated to bale hay and didn't really like cows and didn't like the idea of being a prison guard. And so I was looking around, figured I was probably going to end up going to a local school, playing basketball, teaching history and coaching high school basketball. And the guidance counselor at the school said, Sean, you've got more talent than that. You should look broader. And for a small town, we had two guys the year ahead of me in high school who went to West Point. And one of them was the older brother of my best friend. And my dad kind of pushed that, hey, you should look at this. And the more I thought about it, I decided that would probably open up a number of opportunities, which it did. Probably one of the, if not the best, one of the best decisions I made in my life. Went from being arguably a big fish in a tiny little pond to going to being part of 1,400 men and women. My class was the first with women. Saw a lot of interesting things with that, and found out that while I thought I was pretty special, I wasn't special at all. And so went to West Point, and I wouldn't say I had a great time there. I learned a lot there. And as Mike Krzyzewski, the head coach at Duke, says, it's the best leadership school in America. And learn kind of the basics of leadership. A number of key things you learn there. One is the first thing they teach is failure is not terminal.
Failure is not permanent, you said?
Failure is not terminal.
Terminal. Okay, terminal.
And, they basically overload you till you fail. And you learn that you have to work with teammates to accomplish things, that you can handle stress, and how to plan, how to execute, and how to recover. And I went to West Point with some great guys. We had the most generals since the class of 1915 at West Point.
Oh wow!
Had one of my friends who was a congressman just retire after about 25, 26 years in Congress. We have the astronaut who spent the longest time in space.
Wow!
And I kind of count myself as one of the not so successful people in the class, but
just a CEO of a publicly traded company, no big deal.
Well, funny story. I had one of my friends, Mike Bones Linnington, who's now the CEO of the Wounded Warrior Project. I said, Bones, I never saw you becoming a general. We knew each other at West Point, and you've just done fantastically. And he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, nobody had you being a CEO either, Feeney. So that's my wife's favorite story from our reunion. So,
I love it.
But I graduated. I waited 3 weeks to get married after graduation, only because two of my best friends were getting married the first two Saturdays after graduation.
Fair enough.
So, being from a small town, when you dated somebody for a couple of years, you got married. And luckily for us, it's worked out. We've been married 42 years coming up here, and there are 41 years coming up in June. But we went to Germany kind of during the height of the Cold War, served there, commanded a unit. Was a nuclear capable officer, learned that, basically that there's a zero defect operation, learned from soldiers how to lead even further. learned a number of key leadership lessons there. And I loved being in the Army. I mean, I loved running PT in the morning. I loved being out in the woods. And, the Army and their infinite wisdom, once you've commanded, they basically have you go teach school or work in recruiting or have an administrative job for the next 8 to 10 years. And I just didn't want to do that. And so when they wouldn't send me back to the 82nd Airborne or send me to Korea or Germany back to where the real action was, I said, well, I'll show you guys, I'll quit. And they said, well, we want you so bad, we'll let you go early. So I got out, started selling software. And, I've been around long enough that I started back, in the original cloud, which was actually time sharing. So, when we were running spreadsheets for corporations and charging them, $100,000 a month to run scenarios, and Lotus 123 kind of changed that market dramatically. But I kind of worked and took, kind of different sales jobs, became a VP of sales, ultimately got an opportunity to be a CEO. And key for me was I was exposed to some of the, some great leaders. Some you may have heard of, some you've probably never heard of, but I got a real education, and I thought coming up on the sales side of the business was critical. I think, and what I tell my guys in any place that I've run is, look, nothing happens until somebody sells something. Right. And you can have great ideas, but the great entrepreneurs are great salespeople, and the great operators, I think, are salespeople, because part of leadership is selling. It's right. Selling a vision. It's selling the culture changes you're making. And, that's some of what we've done here at USA Technologies, which is basically, here's what we're trying to do. Here's what we're doing to get there, taking accountability, reporting on it. And here's what we're doing to change the culture. Here's what we're doing to develop people. So, I was lucky enough to get a CEO job in 2005 with a company called Innovis. We ran that for about 6 years. I worked with a number of private equity firms, which I think is very good for a young CEO.
I agree.
They show you the focus on the numbers. And no matter what you want to talk about, it's the numbers.
Right.
And what are we doing? And, I worked with two great private equity firms on my first deal, which is Golden Gate Capital and Cerberus. And then I worked for a little while with Golden Gate Capital as an operating affiliate. And then Warburg Pincus recruited me to take over a company called TradeCard, which we merged with GT Nexus, and ultimately sold to Infor, to Charles Phillips. And very good outcome for the investors and for my employees. A lot of them are still working there. I got involved with an investment in a small cybersecurity firm that I ran for 2 years, recruited my replacement. We raised some more money, and I kind of stepped aside and retired. And
that was around what year? Sorry?
That was in 2018.
Okay.
Excuse me, 2019. January 2019, I retired, and was just going to serve on boards and do a little consulting. And then I got a call from a good friend of mine who was an executive recruiter. And the next thing I knew, I was talking to the Hudson Executive Capital guys about if they won the proxy battle coming in as the CEO of USA Technologies.
Nice.
Showing you what a good forecaster I was. I saw immediately that I thought COVID would be over in a few months. Was way off on that. And, it's, if I'd probably thought about it more, I'm not sure I would have done it. But I was really attracted by the opportunity. Number one, just an incredible board of directors for a company our size. Just talent, very much involved, very much engaged. I learned something every couple of days from one of my board members, and I'm happy to have them. And then, I saw it was a great opportunity. It was a company that was doing okay, had obviously lost its way a little bit, and had kind of stumbled a bit, but was in a great market. If you think about it, the unattended retail market is only going to grow and grow. And, cash has been going to become less and less important. And that's probably been one of the things that COVID has driven. And I look at, where I've been successful is taking companies that had a good product, have good customers in good markets, and for one reason or another have either slowed down or have stumbled, or there's something that the investors ultimately want to fix. And, that's kind of where I've been successful. I'm not a huge idea guy. I'm not an entrepreneur. I look at myself as an operator and probably a turnaround operator. And I enjoy doing that. And, I'm 63 today. I enjoy working. The people in the business just get me up and get me fired up and ready to go every day. So that's my story. I kind of have come up as a sales guy. This is the fourth CEO job I've had. We've had some good exits. In fact, all my investors still talk to me, and I've developed a lot of people into VPs of sales, CEOs, execs. That's what I'm proudest of, and I've got two daughters that work in the software industry as well. So the good news on that is they figured out that maybe I know a little bit about what I'm talking about.
There's so much there, Sean, to unpack. I absolutely love it. Thank you for that wonderful, wonderful overview. It's an inspirational story and a remarkable story. First off, thank you for your service. I mean, that's front and center. Second, leadership lessons from back, I guess, in your formative years, even up to West Point. Where would you say your top 3 or top 5 leadership lessons were that you've learned, let's say, before you took over as first CEO? Because I've learned a lot from studying the smart money, so to speak, and people in your position, that a lot of their values and their infrastructure, for lack of a better word, their software settings, how about that? The way they're programmed stems from not so much their youth, but stems from earlier experiences and things that were impressionable, or they've learned or mentored, something along those lines along the way. So if you could speak to that a little bit, what you learned, if anything, maybe nothing, from your earlier years, those formative lessons, and then how they impact you today, that'd be the first place to start the conversation, if you don't mind.
Yeah, that's a great question, Adam. And it's something, that I've thought about a lot. First of all, my dad was somebody who just had really high expectations, and probably higher for me than I did. And he was not warm and cuddly. He was a pusher. And I'm the oldest, and I have 2 sisters, and I often say to my 2 sisters, you grew up with a different father than I did.
By the way, I have 2 younger sisters also, and I'm the oldest. I can relate.
And, for whatever reason, from an early age, I started playing quarterback in football when I was 8 years old. Oh, wow. And I was the point guard on the basketball team. And, I think football is the best team building sport. And I often talk to, my daughters. It's unfortunate that women don't play football. I think soccer may be a close substitute, but I do think that, the things that go on a football team really, I thought, kind of built the foundation for some of the things that I learned in leadership, because you face adversity, you face pain, you face failure, you face the highs of success, but you've got to come back and recover. And so I thought I had a very good basis there in kind of looking at it. And I had some great high school coaches, both in football and basketball. And I went to West Point, and it was at the end of the Vietnam era. We had all sorts of heroes from Vietnam as our instructors. And you saw good leaders and bad leaders. And I think it's important to see bad leaders as well as good leaders in the way that they lead, right, so that you develop your style. And, not every leader has the same style. But I think that knowing, kind of the key thing is, what's the situation? What's the mission? What's the concept of the operation? What are the resources? And then what's the communication? And that's the 5-paragraph op order that everything in the military is done on.
Let's do that again. Sorry, can you repeat that again? So what's the mission?
Well, now you're really trying my memory. So you have situation.
Situation first, okay.
What's the mission? What are you trying to do? What's the concept of the operation? How you're going to do it? You have logistics. What are the resources to get it done? And then what's the communication? Got it. And then, there's amendments and things that file from there. But any operation, whether it's the invasion of Iraq, it's D-Day, they all basically start with a 5-paragraph op order. And so you learn that's how you plan. And the key is to plan. And then you also learn that violent execution is the key, because the plan goes out the window, the first bullet, or the first time you get punched in the nose, or the first time the bullet flies by you, those go out the window. And also the criticality of integrity. I've got to be able to trust you. You've got to be able to trust me. And then also how important confidence is, and that the organization has confidence in the leader has confidence in themselves. And look, we may act like we know what we're doing all the time. We don't know what we're doing 95% of the time. And the key is you've got to impart confidence in your organization, whether that's a squad, whether that's a company, whether that's a corporation, in what you're doing. And, so I think at West Point, I learned a number of things, kind of how to build on that. But, setting a vision, figuring out how to do it, give people the resources, and then holding them accountable to ultimately getting that done. And then I mentioned I had a number of CEOs I worked for, but I had two guys who I worked for that told me two great pieces of advice. One, Pete Kite, who was the founder of Check Free. If you pay your bills online, basically Pete invented that. I asked Pete, I said, Pete, I'm going to be a CEO for the first time. What's the best advice you can give me? And he said, Sean, here's my number one piece of advice. As a CEO, you need to figure out what you don't do well, and then don't do that. When you think about it, I thought I kind of laughed. I thought that's pretty trite. The more you think about it, that is so true. And so I constantly have to look at what are the things that I like to do. And sometimes the things you like to do aren't the things you do well. So I know that I don't like negotiating. I don't have the patience for it. I don't have it. And so I tell my guys, I'm the last guy you want in the room, because once I walk in, I'm going to try and cut a deal as quick as I can cut it. And it probably won't be as good a deal as
get out of there. Yeah.
Keep me out of there and keep that. And the second is Pete Siniscali, who was the president at Check Free, went on to be the CEO of Manhattan and a couple of other companies, now CEO of Aptos here in Atlanta. And he used to tell me, he goes, Sean, look, you only get one chance at your reputation. So once you have a reputation for not being honest, or your reputation for this or that, you're done. Right. So, think about that whenever you're faced with a situation. I thought that was great leadership. So I apologize, Adam. That's a long, winding answer to a pretty simple.
Fantastic. Actually, your first piece of advice there, what you don't do well, and don't do that. Warren Buffett has a great line. He goes, stay in your circle of competence. In other words, know what you know what's important, and literally nothing else. Say no to everything else.
Yeah. I think the problem with me is it wouldn't be a circle, it'd be a dot. So
that's more than me. That's fantastic. Okay. So I love that. Now that's leadership. You spoke about pain and obviously pleasure and mistakes, and embrace your mistakes you talked about. A lot of people do the opposite. They don't like making mistakes. They avoid the mistakes. They don't do something because of fear of failure, so on and so forth. Can you speak to how pain is, or how you handle pain and or potential mistakes? You embrace them, you deal with them, you cut the losses quickly. How do you handle those type of situations?
Yeah, I think I would be being less than honest if I told you, as the oldest child, and the oldest child is always the rule follower and doesn't ever want to make a mistake. So, I don't like making mistakes, and I don't like putting myself in situations where I don't know. So I know that I have to push myself towards that and have the confidence that the things that I think are right. And, I think back to 99, 2000, when, all these internet things were going on, and you're looking at this going, and I just kept saying some of the stuff just makes no sense to me. And I go, I must be, at the time I was 42 years old, and I go, it's over. These guys are so much smarter. And then you find out, well, maybe we weren't all such idiots as we thought we were. Right. But, I do think that I had an investor ask me an interesting question, or a potential investor. He said, look, I like to talk to the management teams, but here's the question I like to ask. What's the biggest regret in your life? Right. And I said, well, in business. He goes, no, in your life. Right. Which I thought was kind of a crazy question, but it's another one of those ones you think back on, it's pretty good. I look at it, and I've been one that I basically do the things that I like, and I kid around with people and say I buy the demo all the time. But I get in business with people I like. I like the idea. I don't do a ton of diligence. It's probably bit me, in the butt a few times. Right. But it's also put me in great situations. What I have found, and I learned this in the Army, is you just got to keep marching. And it's tough, but the race is won more by people that just keep fighting. And, when I was out in Silicon Valley, I saw people that were trying to get rich in 9 months over and over and over again. And the guys who really, and the women who really do it, are people that grind away at a company for 10, 15 years. Pete Kite used to talk about, I really hate it because, I've been doing this for 25 years, and sometime between, I went to bed one night and we were too small, and I woke up the next morning and we were too powerful.
Right.
And I missed the whole great thing of what it is. And you guys all think that this was an overnight success, but we've been at this for a long time. And so, when you look back on, especially on turnarounds, you have some bad days and you have some bad weeks. And you just got to keep going. And then when you look back, it's kind of like, wow, yeah, boy, we made quick progress. But when you're doing it, it's difficult, and you do it. And the biggest thing is you look so much at battles, you look so much at things that we learned at West Point, you look so much in business. It's the teams that fight through that are often a success. And you get overnight success maybe once in your career, but most of it is grinding. And they don't show you the 3 or 4 years grinding away. You see it when your stock's going crazy and you're sitting there with Jim Cramer going, having all the fun. But
Right.
The biggest thing is you just got to keep marching, and you got to keep fighting. And Drew Brees retired the other day. I thought he had a great quote. He said, "You've got to focus on the process and doing the right things. And success may not come right away, but you've got to have confidence that you're doing the right things, and that ultimately the process in doing those right things will win out." And I think that's true in business. I tell the company all the time, guys, look, we're doing the right things. And I often ask, we get in a situation with a customer, what's the right thing to do?
Right.
What's the right thing for them? What's the right thing for us? Your sales guys always want to do the right thing for the customer.
Right.
Your finance guys always want to do the right thing for the company.
Right.
It's in there in the middle somewhere. But if you can get people thinking that way, then they begin to see, okay, look, Sean's focused on the right things. We're building a culture of we do right. And doing right, it's a three-legged stool. You have shareholders, you have customers, and you have employees. And I've got to balance those three things at all times. And your board's there to keep you honest. And I think that's what we're doing here at USA Technologies.
No, I love that. So the next question or topic I want us to ask you about valuation. So you've been part of PE firms and buying, selling companies. Value, like beauty, is very subjective. How do you handle valuation?
I think, I have a trite saying, and valuation only matters on the day that you sell.
Right.
And, that's an important day. And I worked at a public company. I mentioned Pete Kite a couple of times. He used to say, guys, the stock price is 135. That doesn't define us. Same thing when it's 15, doesn't define us.
Right.
Do the right things, build a company, valuation will take care of itself. And there's times where, people are enthralled with what you're doing and momentum, and there's times where you don't. I believe that if you have a company and you're growing and you're making money, ultimately all you do is improve on that from there. And then it's valuation can be a little bit fickle. I like valuation metrics when they're applied to me. I don't like them when I'm looking to do M&A with someone else, but I try not to focus on valuation. I try to do the things that I know will increase valuation, and that's growth in top line revenue, growth in EBITDA, and ultimately that'll provide growth to my shareholders, and that'll provide growth opportunities to our employees.
Got it. So, well, I can't thank you enough. I guess while we're closing here, the next thing would be sales. What are some lessons you've learned from selling that you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, I think I'm a great believer I talked a little bit about leadership, but confidence. And I believe in setting realistic sales goals, because I know when I was a sales guy, when I was over quota, I was a lot better salesman than when I was 20% of quota. And I believe that people sell with confidence, they sell more, and that's critical. So realistic goals, building confidence in your sales team, understanding that the winds of change are felt first on the face of your people closest to your customer. So why would salespeople come back and lie to us about what the customers are saying or what's the product? And I've been in any number of rooms where you're arguing over, well, that customer's just not smart enough to buy our product. And that's the most ridiculous thing anybody can ever say. So I like to be close to the salespeople. I like to listen to them. So set realistic goals, push them, incite them to do the things that the company needs them to do, not they need to do to make a ton of money. and then pay attention to what your competitors are doing and be a step ahead of them. So your salespeople have confidence in the organization that you'll deliver on it. And look, the salespeople are the tip of the spear, but if everybody else doesn't deliver, the salespeople ultimately fail. And so while they'll sell it, we've got to then deliver it. And the key in an organization is the sales team has to have confidence in customer support, in implementation, in finance, and the rest of the organization. And the organization's got to have confidence in the sales organization that they're not going to sell them into situations that they can't be successful at. Now, I've run enough small companies. You got to sell yourself into trouble sometimes, and then
no question.
And we've got a deal we were working on yesterday. I said, I'm not worried about this. We got a lot of smart people. Sell us into trouble. We'll dig our way out. So that's kind of the way I think about sales. You got to push them and look, and I'll get on them. I mean, there's a reason salespeople make the most money in the company. It's a tough job. Right. But, when they're telling me how tough it is, I remind them that, there's some guy over there at Coca-Cola, which I can see from here, selling Dasani water. And the last time I checked, water's free. Right. So, they've got a tough job. You selling this software that's going to help them run their business better. You guys just need to be better salespeople than what you're doing.
Understood. Perfect. Just to make sure we're okay on time for a little bit longer here, a few minutes.
Sure. We're talking about my company and me. I got all day for you.
I just want to make sure I be out of respect for the time, and I can't thank you enough, Sean. This is fantastic. So, okay, on the sales note, I've seen people struggle with sales. A lot of them are like you said, they can't sell their way out of a paper bag. What separates a great salesperson from someone who can't do it? I mean, that's a big question, but if you could speak to some of the key points or characteristics you've seen successful salespeople share, or tendencies or traits, that would be much appreciated.
I think it's 3 or 4 key things. It's energy, empathy, aggressiveness, and just a feeling of wanting to help people. And the last thing is confidence. So, and I've seen, and so you have a lot of salespeople who can't explain how they do it. Okay.
So true. Just like investors, they can't explain it.
Because they know that, I've got to have a process in which I get leads, I embrace them, I sell them, and I just follow up and do those things. And, there's always a certain amount of likability. I've had top salespeople who were just the hardest people to deal with, internally. But everybody gets to understand that they don't push the organization any harder than they push themselves. The people that fail are the people that it's never my fault. It's somebody else didn't do this. There's 9,000 reasons. And look, I always used to say that the top 15, 20% are going to be the top 15, 20%. If you put them in the worst territory, they're going to figure out a way to do it. Right. The bottom 15 or 20% are going to take the best territory and figure out how to run that into the ground.
Yep.
The biggest thing is if you can then move that great middle 1 or 2 percentage points up by giving them confidence, giving them good products, giving them good training, putting them in situations, then you can be successful as an organization. But, I think energy, empathy, confidence, and then knowledge is the key for salespeople to be successful. And that's why you see people that are, I've seen introverts that when you go on a sales call, they're a different person. Yeah. I've seen the very, most outgoing, bubbly people that are very good. And I've also seen them be, that wouldn't fail. And I think sales is about relationships, and it may be a very quick relationship if you're selling over the phone, or it may be, on some deals, I've had companies where our sales cycle was a year and a half. Right. And at any one point along that, saying the wrong thing can set you back for a long time. But, I have people that I sold to when I was a sales rep and a sales manager that are still friends of mine, still talk to them. I just think it's a little bit of a personality trait, but it's, salespeople are the hardest people to interview and hire. And when you're successful in one situation, you may not be successful in another situation. But when I look at the 2 or 3 best that I ever had, I mean, they push themselves hard, they push the organization hard. And in fact, I gave a reference for one of them the other day, and I said, look, you're hiring a Ferrari. Make sure you want to drive a Ferrari, because if you don't want to drive a Ferrari, driving the Ferrari, to the grocery store and back every day isn't going to make anybody happy, including the Ferrari.
Right.
So if you want to be pushed, you really want to grow, this guy's going to run your sales organization. He's going to make your life miserable for a while. Right. But I'll tell you, he will deliver.
Right.
Now, he'll threaten to burn your general counsel's house down over not, getting a contract out on time. He'll say, if you don't fix this, I'm going to do this. But everyone in that organization knew that John, and his name was John McCracken. He's kind of very well known now. And, he pushed himself harder than pushed anybody. And the guy he threatened the most at Check Free when he worked for me is the guy who called me up and said, this guy's available. You need to hire him because he won't last the day. So he's now working with my old firm, Warburg, helping them with grow sales and do some of those things. Be a great guy for you to interview on sales.
Yeah, please, by any means. I'd love to have any and all referrals would be greatly appreciated. Okay, especially if they have a tenth of the knowledge and wisdom and experience you have, Sean. I'm absolutely loving this. So, okay, a few more questions about you, and then I'd like to shift the focus to USA Technologies if possible,
Sure.
Because there's so much here. Okay, you spoke about turnarounds. So when you run a company, there's three kinds of companies for the example that you use: top 20%, middle, and then the bottom 20%, right? A great company, okay, middle, and the bottom ones. What are some of the characteristics, whether they're operations, their sales, their finance, the board, so to speak, where you see that, hey, define greatness in the top 5%, top quartile, whatever word you want to use to describe the great companies? And then what are some of the weaker ones that they just have? And then how do you turn those weaker ones around?
Well, look, any company that's gotten out of the ground and has been successful had a good idea and executed something at some point. And, if you've ever tried to start something from nothing and get revenue growing,
I have.
When you read Fortune and Forbes and, watch television and read books, boy, it sounds so simple.
Right.
When you're doing it or do those sort of things. And so, I think that the great companies have great vision, great products, and are maniacal about continuing to compete, and are led by people that are just have that ability. And the question is being top 20 for a long time. So we've all seen the books and the studies of the companies that were the Fortune 100. When I was born in the late 1950s, most of them don't exist anymore. They come and they go. But I think that the way that I look at it is, and look, I don't ever get recruited to run those kind of companies. Those are, they don't, get gut grinders like me. You get great strategic thinkers and people that work those. And it's, when people ask, how'd you go from being a guy carrying a rifle in the woods to being a CEO? And, it's like being a college or pro sports coach. You get to coach some bad teams.
Right.
They can't find anybody else.
Yeah.
And if you make those a success, then you get to keep doing those. But I think when you look at my philosophy on turnarounds is, look, if the company is any scale at all or any size, they had something at one time that was successful.
Right.
And the key is, and they had people in the organization that knew what they were doing. So, I like, when I come into an organization, the first thing I like to do is talk to as many people as I can and listen. They don't need to hear about what I can do. I need to hear kind of what's going on here. Right. And I start, from all over the organization. And I talk to the admin assistants, and I talk to the salespeople. I talk to customer service. I talk to customers. Second thing is, you have to have some empathy in that situation of here's what's going on here. Right. And then I have a saying, that's that I use all the time, which is think, decide, and act. Which is, okay, let's think.
Yeah.
I stole that from Watson, the guy. Think, Think.
I got that. What was the second part after think?
Decide.
Okay.
You got to make a decision, and then the last is act.
Okay. Think, decide, act. Okay.
Think, decide, act. Violently execute your plan, and then adjust. And often in a company, the key is there's people that know what they're doing or should be doing, and then there's people sitting on top of them that are keeping them from doing that. Right. And so I have a pretty simple philosophy. I try to find the people getting in the way of the people that know what they're doing and get rid of them.
Got it.
And replace them with people that can do better. And that's true whether you're running an infantry company or you're running a company of the size that we're running. And then you basically build that confidence and build the culture back in the organization. And look, culture is the key trend in a company. I believe, you go to Apple and everybody's walking around with a pretty good swagger.
Yep.
You walked around to the bottom 20, everybody's got their chin on their chest, worrying about where am I going to work next? This company isn't good enough. I can get another job. How am I going to pay my family? All those sort of things. So if you can turn that and begin to get them thinking, hey, maybe this guy knows what he's doing. Maybe he's hiring good people. And look, and as you're turning those companies, people fall out along the way because, I tell them right up front, guys, it's okay. Sooner or later, there's going to be the straw that broke the camel's back. And I hope we don't ever get there. But look, some of you have been through some tough stuff here, and it's not going to get any easier because I'm going to push you pretty hard.
Right.
But, we're going to have success if we can get to the other end. And so, it's a journey. And the journey is a lot of fun because if you get to the other end, people realize that you're doing it. And look, the number one thing that a leader has to hold himself to do is, did I leave the organization in a better place than when I got there? And that's all I'm trying to do. It's a pretty simple goal, but if I can feel like, I put the products in a better place, I put the teams in a better place, the shareholders are in a better place, I'm comfortable. And look, I've been doing this long enough, and if I'm not working out, then, I tell the guys all the time, guys, look, if we don't deliver on this, there'll be somebody else sitting here next year, and I'm a big boy. I'm fine with that. So not fine with it. I mean, no one likes to be told you're not good enough, but, and hopefully we don't get to that point. So far we're doing okay.
That's why you're fine with it, because you want to make sure it doesn't happen and you're not worried about it happening. Okay. Yeah, Sean, that's fantastic. So shifting focus a little bit now, in the next episode, I'm going to ask you about the company USA Technologies, but I want to thank you very much for this episode, and I'll speak to you again real soon.
Great. I've enjoyed it, and we'll talk to you soon. Give me a call anytime.